All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is great to see you again today. We are hosting our monthly best practices call with Cliff Karthauser. If you're new to the organization and don't know who I am, my name is Silas Jessup, and I'm a sales leader, an agency manager, and an agent here in Northern Indiana. Rick Bell and I have partnered with our two territories to host these monthly events. And I just want to put in a quick plug. I believe there's tremendous value in the content that Cliff is delivering in these sessions. Over the last couple of years, Cliff has really entrenched himself within our organization, and he is coaching and mentoring many of our top agents and leaders, and working directly with our executive leadership team, just to help guide us through and navigate through the nuances of running a really successful insurance agency. Cliff has a tremendous background in the financial sector, and he knows things like what an FYCR are or is, and other things that I think are kind of unique to the health markets culture. And I think it's been fun to watch Cliff develop with our organization. I believe we're one of the very few organizations that he's working with. He's almost exclusive to health markets at this point. So he has a lot of content that he delivers across the country to different teams. Obviously, it's our my territory here in Northern Indiana and Rick Bell's territory that he's speaking to in this particular session. But this is something we want to continue. Rick and I are investing significantly to bring this content to you. And I hope you pull something from it. I would recommend, if you didn't have a chance to, it'd be a good idea to print out the study guide and material that Cliff had sent and we had sent out ahead of time. I think it's a great place to take notes. I keep these on file and refer back to them because there are tidbits that I pick up from every session. So I'm still letting people in as we speak, but Cliff, I know we've got an hour together, so I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you, my friend. Thanks for being here again today.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Thanks to you, and thanks to Rick. I'm assuming he's on the call somewhere out there in Columbus or Detroit or somewhere. And it's awesome. I mean, we're building a community here, and when we're picking up steam, we're picking up momentum. There's more and more people joining these calls. And so what I want to do over the course of this year is I want to build a community of tier 4 agents. Does that sound pretty good to everybody? You know, tier 4 agents, that's a goal. So I'm going to put a quick plug in for our next session. And I haven't even completed this lesson, but between now and when we're together again, I'll have it completed. And I've titled it Cracking the Code, CODE, Cracking the Code. And so what we're going to be talking about are cracking the code on a couple of things. One is consistent customer and client acquisition. So how do we crack the code on customer and client acquisition? You all want to acquire more customers, right? And then the other thing is to really build an impeccable customer and client experience. What goes into that? So cracking the code, I want you to think about 3 components to cracking the code. And so think of that as really 3 numbers on a combination lock. Remember in junior high, we had or at least I did, the combination locks. We go to gym class and there's three numbers in that combination lock. And so if we dial these 3 numbers in correctly, we can all have a breakthrough in our business. And so the 3 components that I'm going to be sharing in June are: number 1, your core solution process; number 2, your practice management process; and number 3, your relationship management process. And so we're gonna be unlocking the combination on those 3 things. In addition to that, I'm going to share with you the 4 cornerstones to creating a value proposition. And I hope all of you have one, but if you don't, that's okay. We're going to be talking about the 4 cornerstones as you really build and create your differentiated value proposition. Now, typically these calls occur the 2nd Wednesday of every month. And so Rick Bell wanted to move the call because of Italy. A lot of you are, what a great event and recognition and celebration that's going to be. We're going to move this call to June 5th. June 5th, same time, over the noon hour, kind of lunch and learn best practices. So mark your calendar now for June 5th, cracking the code, noon to 1 Eastern time. So today what we're going to talk about are, and I'm a firm believer that small habits can make a huge difference in our personal and in our professional life. And I think you'd all agree. And so the aggregation of marginal gains. So what does the word aggregate even mean? Well, it's searching for a tiny margin of improvement in what we do. That's what it is to have an aggregation or aggregate. We're looking for small, tiny margins of improvement in everything we do within our practice that's going to give us a slight edge as we continue to improve and grow and build our business. And so think about it in terms of 1%. Can I get 1% better each day? It's not monumental movement. It's having the discipline to have tiny margins of improvement in what we do. And so why is it so important? And why do small habits make such a big difference? It's so easy. Think about it. And this all makes sense. It's so easy for all of us to overestimate the importance of this one big event or this one defining moment in our life, right? We can all recall those. So it's so easy to overestimate the importance of those, but underestimate the value of making small improvements on a consistent basis, on a daily basis, day in and day out. So improving by 1%, and here's if we just think about this for a second, improving by 1%, it isn't particularly notable. Are we going to note a 1% improvement? Are we going to throw a party? No, it's not even notable, a 1% improvement. We dismiss it. Sometimes it's not even noticeable. We don't even see the needle moving. It's not notable, it's not noticeable, but it can be far more meaningful in the long run. It's just most people quit. So they start making these small investments in improving their business, their craft, their trade. But what do? They throw the towel in because they can't see that needle moving. So they get discouraged or disillusioned or frustrated and they say, heck with it. I'm not making any progress. So I want you to think about this, a habit. What is a habit? It's a routine or behavior that's performed on a regular basis. You all know that. So a habit. So if you were to define a habit, it's really a routine or a behavior that we perform on a regular basis, consistently. And in many cases, what do? We do that habit automatically. We don't even think about it. So think about habits as the compound interest of self-improvement. That's what they are. A habit is the compound interest of self-improvement. And so success, let's think about our success that we all want to have. It's the product of these daily habits, not once in a lifetime transformation. But most people don't have the discipline to stick with something. Why? Because they can't even see movement occurring. They can't see progress being made. So we become discouraged, disillusioned. And what do? It's human nature when these things happen to disengage. We just kind of disengage. And this isn't mine, but I forget who I learned this from. It's a book I read. It's been probably a year ago, but he talked about the plateau of latent potential. And I think there's so much to this as it relates to the business that you're in. And it relates to our habits because they appear to make no difference until we cross a critical threshold and unlock a new level of performance.
Hey, Cliff.
So, yes.
That's James Clear in Atomic Habits, just so
That's
that
it.
you know.
That's it. That's it. Did you read that book?
Yes.
Yeah, well, he talks about this and it makes so much sense when we boil this down to its simplistic form and try to unlock this new level. What happens in the early stages? We take on something new and we try something for the first time. And in the early stages, maybe even in the middle stages, there's often this, and it's in your outline. What do we have? We have this valley. He calls it a valley of disappointment. And I think it's so true that we expect to make progress in this linear fashion. We want to see this angle just, 45 degrees, just moving up. And it's frustrating to us because what happens is how ineffective change can seem during the first days or weeks, sometimes maybe even months, right? It doesn't seem like we're going anywhere. It's just, oh my gosh, all this heavy lifting and I'm not seeing any progress. I mean, related to losing weight or getting in better shape, or we could use one in a million different analogies, right? We become frustrated and discouraged. And that's the hallmark of any compounding process. It really, truly is. The most powerful outcomes are what? They're delayed. The most powerful, the most significant progress, it's delayed. And so how big a price are we willing to pay to stay the course, to hang in there long enough? So in order to make this meaningful difference, habits need to persist long enough to break through this plateau. And so at the top of your diagram, the very top left, this is what we think should happen. We want things to move in a linear fashion. You write that on your outline, what you think should happen. We want things to go up. We want to see progress immediately. So the vertical axis is results, and on the horizontal axis is time. And so that lower line, we barely see that line moving. And we're in the game, we're doing all these things. We're creating the right habits, we're creating the right routines. And in a week into this, 2 weeks into this, there you go. That line is barely, that horizontal line at the bottom is barely moving. But if we stay in the game long enough, what starts to occur is we're going to have a breakthrough. And that line will actually intersect the linear line and continue to go up. Well, that space in the middle, that kind of gray area, that's what he talks about. That's the valley of disappointment. And what happens is we throw the towel in because we want results yesterday. We want to go from tier 1 to tier 4. And that's not going to happen overnight. The goal should be to go from tier 1 to tier 2 and then set our sights on tier 3. And then what is it going to take? What habits, what disciplines, what behaviors do we have to change in order to be a tier 4 agent? If that's a goal, if that's a desire. And so, when you think about it, why do some people stick with their habits? Well, a lot of people really struggle to stay motivated, to stay in the game. And so how do we design habits that really pull us in rather than ones that just kind of fade away? I'm going to stop there, Silas, for a second and just take a thought, or if anybody has a question. But I think if we can unpack what we're talking about today, we can all get to another level and we can all have a breakthrough, whatever that may, however we define that for ourselves. There's so much psychology behind what stands in the way of getting to that next level. Does anybody have a thought or a comment or a question? If not, I'll keep rolling. Mike, I don't know if you have, is this making sense?
Absolutely. The other thing that he taught you, and you talked about the 1%.
Yes.
He shows a graph of that. Like if you improve 1% per day, and that's your focus, at the end of the year, your results mathematically are like 37% better. Whereas if you go the other direction, you don't lose as much because you have way more room to grow.
Sure.
than to recede.
Yeah, makes all the sense in the world. Well, what's interesting is there's been research done on this, scientists and research done, and what they found is that one of the most consistent findings is that one of the ways to maintain motivation and achieve peak levels of performance and results and desire in the things that we do is to work, and they coined a phrase, is to work on tasks of just manageable difficulty. And I think there's really something to be said about working on tasks of just manageable difficulty. That's what these researchers coined this. And so what does that mean? Well, the human brain loves a challenge. We love to be challenged, but only if it's within an optimal zone of difficulty. And that's the key. What does that mean? We have a good chance of winning. So we're going to put ourselves out there. I mean, if Silos hires a new agent and says, you know what, you're going to start and you're here, we want to get you from tier 1 to tier 2, but I expect you to be a tier 4 agent in 90 days. That's not within an optimal zone of difficulty, because I'm not going to buy into that as an agent once I start to learn how hard that is. And so we have to challenge ourselves, but within an optimal zone of difficulty, we have to have a good chance of winning if we really try. Now we want to stretch ourselves, but if I feel that I have a reasonable degree or percentage of winning, I'm going to stay in the game. And so when I feel that there's a chance of winning the game, whatever that is, as it relates to your business, what happens? My focus is going to narrow and my distractions are going to fade away. And I'm going to find myself fully invested because I put myself in the game and I'm telling myself, I can get there. I'm going to have to work hard at this, but I know it's within my optimal zone of difficulty. If I believe to begin a new task that it's just going to be nearly impossible for me to get there, I'm not going to put the effort into it. Now, I may say all the right things, but the reality is I don't believe I can get there. So research has found that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right at the edge of their current abilities. So they're on the edge. They've got to stretch themselves, but they're telling themselves the self-talk, I can get there. I believe I can get there. There's so much to this. We could do a whole session on this. Silas, what are your thoughts? I mean, am I making sense? Is this making sense?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's easy to see, I think, for a new agent getting started from scratch, right? But I think there's a lot of this that we can apply, to agents that are already at a tier 3 or even a tier 4 status and want to move from 300,000 rolling FYCRs to 600 or 700,000
Right.
Rolling FYCRs. I would encourage everybody. To Mike's point earlier, I actually listened to the Atomic Habits book. I'd read it a couple of years ago, and then I listened to it over spring break again this year, and it really resonated a little more the second time. There's also another book that I've encouraged my team to read. It's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. If you haven't read The Slight Edge, it's another similar type of book that just talks about, where we end up is a compilation of tiny steps that we've taken in that direction many, many times, and a series of tiny decisions that we've made to actually get there. And so that's another great resource if you haven't read it.
That is a good book. I think sometimes we overcomplicate some of this stuff, and we see highly successful people, and we look at them and say, how in the world are they doing what they're doing in sports or in entertainment or in the insurance and financial services industry? They got there one step at a time. And so, what's the difference between the best and everyone else? Well, is it, and there's some factors, and I got them on your outline. The factors that we might expect. Well, genetics. Could genetics play a role? Sure, it could. Could luck sometimes play a role? Sure. But we make our own luck. If we work really hard, we're going to get our breaks and make our own luck. So genetics, luck. Another one is talent. We're all born with a certain amount of talent, but talent's it's not going to get us to the finish line. It's the hard work and effort. It's nice to have some talent. Well, genetics, think about genes. Genes don't determine your destiny. They determine your areas of opportunity. So those are three things that we might, think about or consider when factors, what separates the best from everyone else. But there's something else. And I'm going to relate Kobe Bryant. Maybe I've shared this story to some of you, but at some point, so what is the something else? At some point, and this is so true of the business that you're all in, at some point it comes down to who can handle the boredom of training every single day, the heavy lifting, hitting the gym, the routine, the boredom of the routine, doing the same things over and over and over again. And a lot of you have to do that. You have a routine that you have to do over and over and over again. And there's some days when you wake up, you say you'd rather throw up than have to go do this same routine over and over and over again. Really successful people, they feel the same lack of motivation as everyone else. They're just not born with 100x motivation over everybody else. No, they lack that same motivation as everyone else. The difference is they still find a way to show up despite the feelings of boredom. They put themselves in action and in motion every day, even though they don't want to, even though they're bored. And so the greatest threat to success is not failure. It's boredom. That's the something else. At some point, everyone faces the same challenges on this journey to self-improvement. We all do. We have to fall in love with the boredom of our daily routines. And let's be honest, some of what we do becomes very mundane and becomes very boring. And so maybe I've shared this with you or not. I'll share it quickly because it really illustrates the point. You know, one of the greatest basketball players of all time was Kobe Bryant. And so I never really studied him or read about him. I was not a Laker fan growing up. I was a Celtic fan. And so, but after his untimely death, I started to read and study this guy, and his work ethic was second to none. He was not only born with talent, one of those factors, but he outworked everybody. And so he had a performance coach. And this individual coaches some of the best athletes in the world, professional basketball players, but athletes outside of basketball. His name's Alan Stein, Stein. And so he was Kobe Bryant's coach for many years, his performance coach. And so he asked Kobe, he said, you know, at him, hey, can I come by the gym and watch one of your workout routines? Because he did so much outside of the normal practice. Kobe did. He way more outside of practice than inside of practice. He said, sure, meet me at the gym tomorrow morning at 4:30. True story. They wrote an article about this after he died. And so Alan Stein didn't want to be late. So he showed up at the gym at 4:15. Gym's unlocked, goes in, Kobe Bryant's in a full sweat already at 4:15. And so he watches this workout and he says, you know, why do you do this? Why are you doing this workout? It's kind of a basic. And his response was, why do you think I'm the best basketball player in the world? Because I never, ever get bored with the basics. And there's something to be said about that. What he's saying is the boredom of the routine. And so we sometimes have to fall in love with the boredom of the routine and show up on a consistent basis. And showing up consistently is where the magic starts to really happen, because we all show up. Most people show up inconsistently. And so think about your business. If you're showing up inconsistently, so maybe out of a 5-day work week, you're really on point 2.5 to 3 days, and your competition is on point and they're all in 5 days, they don't have to be as good as you, but they'll outperform you because they're consistently putting themselves in motion and in action. So, you know, one of the things that separates the very best as well is consistent execution, because most people do not execute consistently. They execute inconsistently. So I'll stop there for a second. If there's a question or a thought that anyone wants to make or have, this stuff is pretty basic. It's fundamental, but it's what separates the best from everybody else. You know, habits plus deliberate practice equals mastery. Because we're not going to become. Yes.
Hey, Cliff, Kelly.
Hey, Kelly.
I'm not on video, sorry. I mean, what you just said about getting falling in love with the boredom when I first started off, it was like the same mundane thing over and over and over, but that's how we got good. And then when we got good, we started becoming inconsistent.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So we're at that 300,000 level, wanting to get in the 6. I just want to share that.
That's awesome. And I think that's so true. It's human nature. A lot of times, you know, we quit doing, you know, what got us to the dance, all these things that got us there. All of a sudden we quit doing those things. Or, you know, why do we stop doing things that we know fundamentally are going to work? You know, we're creatures of habit. And so, you know, when you think about habits, how do we become world class? How do we become best in class at something? Well, our habits plus our deliberate practice ultimately leads to mastery. It's the difference between a carpenter and a craftsman. It's a whole different mindset around a carpenter and a craftsman. Well, how do you become a craftsman? You have the right habits, but then you practice your craft and your trade over and over and over again. And one day you wake up and you have a reputation in your market that precedes you. So when people think, your clients and customers and prospects think about what they need, your name resonates to the top of the list. Well, you don't create a reputation that precedes you in your market in your first 6 months in the business or year or two. It takes a long time for you to create a brand and a market that everybody knows you, or you're one of the names that resonates. And so habits plus deliberate practice. So we all have goals, right? That we'd like to achieve and dreams. We all have dreams and goals and all these things we'd like to reach and fulfill. But it doesn't matter what we're trying to become better at if we only work on those things when it's convenient or exciting. If that's the only time we do these things, we're never going to be consistent enough to achieve a breakthrough or to go from tier 3 to tier 4 or go from tier 4 to 2x. You know, to go from what is tier 4 now, 225, or I think they raised it a little. You know, how do we go from that to 3 to 4 to 6? I talked to Garrison. I said, you need to have a tier 5. Why wouldn't you want to create a tier 5? Let's raise the bar. Let's create a tier 5 for those who have a desire to go there.
It's interesting, Cliff. I've got a group of tier 4 agents who are just a few short years ago. I listened in on a conversation they had talking about how in the world can we ever consistently achieve 200,000 rolling 12-month FYCRs. And that's when we'd raise the bar a little bit on that tier 4 level. And interesting, looking, and we bring this up pretty regularly, Ray Plagans, Tony Letcher, Derek Mabry, a number of others, where a lot of these guys are running 5, 6, 7, 800,000 rolling 12-month FYCRs now. And it's just like the paradigm that they had just a few short years ago was just absolutely blown by the opportunity that, you know, they've been able to capture in front of them. So it's cool to see that development happen. That's
huge. That's huge. Another thing professionals do, and you're all professionals, you want to think about yourself in a profession. I spoke at John Jacoby's celebration event about 3 weeks ago, and I said, I want you to think about this. You have an opportunity to wake up every single day and not go to a job, but go to a noble profession to make a difference. And you take a backseat to nobody. And I shared there were probably 45 agents and their spouses at this event. I said, you take a backseat to nobody. The difference you make every day, you're right in line with the doctors, the attorneys, you know, the CPAs, the people in ministry. And that's how I want you to think about your you don't wake up and have to go to a job or get to go to a job. You get to go to a noble profession, and you're making a difference every single day. And that's how professionals think about their craft and their trade. Professionals know what's important to them, and they work toward it with what? With purpose, right? With meaning, with fulfillment. What do amateurs do? They get pulled off course by the whirlwind of the day job, all these urgent things. They let the urgency of life get in the way. They really do. So when you think about goals, they're really, really important. But our focus should be in our systems, the process that leads to the goals, because your results, and this is just my way of thinking about the world, and some of you could disagree, and that's okay too, but your results have very little to do with the goals you set and nearly everything to do with the systems that you follow. The activities that you engage in, that you know, your daily agenda, your routine, the prioritization around how you run your business. Now, we all want results. We absolutely want results. So what's the difference between a system and a result or a goal? So we have a system, we have a goal. And Silas wrote the book on systems and processes and procedures. He's got that locked down, probably better than anybody. But what's the difference between systems and goals? Goals are about the results that you want. And we all want results. We want to go to Italy. We want to go from tier 2 to tier 3. We want results. Results are what we want to achieve. Systems are about the process that leads to those results. So it's only when we implement this system of continuous improvements that we achieve a different outcome. And so what we want to do is we want to create intentional systems that support, sustain, and propel us forward. Otherwise, we're just flying by the seat of our pants. And so if I said, did you have a good week? Well, I think I did. I made 3 sales or whatever the case may be. thinking you had a good week is not good enough, or hoping for a good outcome is not good enough. Systems will propel you forward. So we have to have some fundamental systems that, and we have to be intentional with this because it helps us get better at running our practice, at running our craft and our trade. And so, I want to talk a little bit about, what, the changes that can occur. And there's really 3 levels. And that change change can occur. And is it what's the author's name again? Is his last name Clear? Clear, that wrote that book, Atomic Habits?
Yes, James Clear.
James, yeah. Well, he talks about this. And so, that first layer, when we think about that outside layer, that very exterior layer, he talks about in the context of changing our outcomes. That's that outer layer. Just write that in there, because what's that level concerned with? That level is concerned with changing our results. It's concerned with changing our outcomes. A good example is losing weight, or writing a book, or winning a championship. It's about changing a result. Most of the goals that we set are associated with that level. That's where they are. They're associated with that level of change because we want to change an outcome. We want to change a result. That next layer in, that second layer, is changing our process. And that level, what's that level concerned with? That level is concerned with changing our habits or our systems. An example there would be, well, I need to implement a new routine at the gym. Or I need to declutter my desk for better workflow. Most of the habits, so think about that outer layer. Again, they're associated with changing what? A goal, a result that I want. That second layer in, it's about the habits. It's about most of the habits that we build. They're associated with that level. The third and deepest layer is changing our identity. Changing our identity. And that level is concerned with what? It's concerned with me changing the beliefs that I have. Maybe it's my view of the world, or my self-image, or maybe it's my judgment about myself or maybe other people. That innermost layer. So outcomes so think about that. Outcomes, what are they? They're about what we get. It's a result. Processes, or that second layer in, is about what we do. Identity is about what we believe. And so many people, what do? They begin the process of changing their habits by focusing where? On what they want to achieve. It makes sense. The focus is on what they want to achieve. Losing weight, as an example. And what does that lead to? It leads to outcome-based habits. The alternative is to build identity-based habits, that inner core, identity-based habits. With that approach, we start by focusing on who we really want to become. Who do I really want to become as an agent? What does that look like? How would I articulate that? And if we start with that core, who do we want to become? That's really where we find our purpose, our meaning, our fulfillment, our why. Why start to become kind of an overused word, but it's so true. That's at the core. Purpose, meaning, fulfillment, why. And so behind every system of action is a system of belief. And behavior that's incongruent. So if I have behavior that's really incongruent with who I believe myself to be, are those habits and are those behaviors, are they going to last? No, they're not going to last, because they're incongruent with how I view myself. So improvements are only temporary until they become a part of who we are. And so it's hard to change habits if we never change the underlying beliefs that led to those past behaviors. And so my behaviors are usually a reflection of who? of really how I view myself, of my identity. And so the more deeply a thought or action is tied to my identity. So if I have a thought or a belief or an action, is it in that's really tied to my identity as it relates to my business. So if I have a thought about my practice or my business, and that thought or action is really tied to my identity, it's really going to be difficult for me to change that. So the biggest barrier to positive change at any level. So think about the biggest barrier to positive change, whether that's at your level, within your team, within society, is identity conflict. Because good habits may make all the rational sense in the world, but if they conflict with my identity, how I view myself, I'll fail to put them into action, or I won't put them into action very long. They just won't last. And so every action is that I take is a vote of confidence for the type of person I really want to become. And so what are the habits that we need to engage in as we run our business that are going to serve us really, really well? Well, if we had time, we could all come up with quite a few of those. But I'm going to open that up for just some comments or some thoughts, because I think there's really something to be said about if where we have conflict is really when because my behaviors are a reflection of who I am, my identity. And so when I have conflict there, or they're incongruent with how I view myself, I'm just not going to go there, because I can't see myself. Silas, any want to open it up for a thought or a question there? But if we can unlock that and start to really think about what are the right habits that I need to have every day as it relates to me running my business and interacting with my customers and clients, and focus some of our time and energy there, we're gonna perform better as agents. Anybody have any thoughts, questions? I see Mike Police on the call. Mike, you have any thoughts or questions? Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah. So what I was just thinking about was, because you talk about your identity, and I think for the most part, we know what we should be doing. We know right from wrong, but sometimes we'll get pulled in a direction. And even though it's saying, don't go there, don't go there, maybe our identity is not strong enough where we're weak and we do go that direction, where the more you practice the habits, you find inner strength, and you'll say no to people. You'll say no to going that direction, but it's really just continuing to work on yourself. And again, I guess trying to know right from wrong and being a better person.
Yeah. Yeah. This all runs together, right? Professional person, it all runs together. I've got a gal that I coach, Brenda, and actually she lives here in Omaha. And I had a session with her yesterday, and she's really struggling with some things. Not to go into any of that, but she's really overwhelmed with things at work, and the heavy lifting. You got a lot of anxiety right now, and so we talked about this, and I said, Brenda, one of the things that I try to do every day, and I wrote this on 3x5 cards a few months ago, and it's really helped me. And I have them in my office, and I have them other places, but it's just a simple saying, and it's this: win the morning, win the day. And so my goal every day when I get up, and some days it's harder than others, but my goal is to win the morning. Because when I win the morning, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to win the day. And so one of the things I do, Silas is aware of this, I get up pretty early and I try to get my workout in. And I know, Silas, you're early morning too as well. And that just sets in motion a really positive aspect of my day. I get a workout in, I get a sweat up, I get a quick shower, and then I go to my office. And my kids, a number of years ago for Christmas, they gave me, it's a journal. And on the front cover of the journal, and it's just a journal full of blank pages. And the front cover of the journal says, "My Grateful Journal." It's a green book cover with gold letters. And so after I get my workout shower in, it sets in motion a positive aspect to my day. And then what I do is I recount the prior day, and I try to find 2 to 3 things that I'm grateful for, because I know that if I can do that, it sets in motion a positive attitude. because I know that my attitude's going to control my actions and my actions are going to control my results. So what I want to try to do is win the morning. And typically when you win the morning, you're going to win the day. It's something very simple. Some people, they meditation or mindfulness. I've really never been one to meditate, but I'm sure that's a great exercise as well. Some people, they start by spending 15 minutes in reading something to set in motion the right attitude or the mindset that we need, because you're in a tough business. It's not easy, and we have to stay emotionally up for our customers, prospects, clients. And so it's just something simple: win the morning, win the day. I don't know if anybody has a thought on that, but it's working for me so far. I mean, so I shared that with Brendan. I said, just try to find something that you're grateful for, and just tell yourself, win the morning, win the day. Because she's just dealing with some really heavy stuff right now, and she's just worn down, and she can't see her way out of some of this. And we've all been there, right? We've all been there. So win the morning. Yeah.
I'd just say that some of that stuff I know at earlier in life, a lot of that stuff seemed kind of fluffy to me. I felt like it was, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it would have the impact that I've now proven to myself it has. I'm similar. I like to get up. I like to work out. I think gratitude, when there's gratitude in your day, fear and anger, it's really hard for those two elements to exist. And I learned some of that from some Tony Robbins videos that I've shared with my team over the years. I know Robin Sharma, if you're not familiar with him, he talks about the 5 a.m. club, an elite group of individuals who get up at 5 a.m. and start their day. Something he always said that kind of, I don't know, has resonated with me. He said, those who sweat more in practice bleed less in war. And we're all going to war every day in our lives. And so I think it's great. And that morning ritual is really, really important. I know a lot of our agents have embraced that. And I just encourage you, if you haven't, that can be a game changer across the board.
Yeah. Scott, do you have any thoughts on any of that? You've been around for forever. I mean, do you try to find things that really keep you motivated and really the glass overflowing, or at least half full versus half empty?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of things like that where I love to listen to different tapes and books and things like that. But as you're talking about your analogy, simple thing that helps me on a daily basis is having a daily checklist, right? So it's like going to the grocery store. I'm getting through the task and I can see there's only 3 more things to go, 2 more things to go. So it gets exciting. I'm going to finish what I set out to do.
Yeah.
And, throughout the day, I can also use that checklist of things I got to follow up on the next day. So it's little simple things like that to keep you on course, make you feel good, and then kind of get you staying focused on the things that you need to do.
Yeah. I'm seeing more and more familiar faces, which is awesome. We're building a community. Laura, any thoughts? You have any thoughts on anything? I always see her. She's at every one of these, Silas, without fail. I love to see her smiling face and picture, and it's awesome. Any thoughts or helpful hints or things that you try to do to maintain that positivity? Because there's days when it's tough. Let's be real. I mean, there's days when it's hard.
Absolutely. I love, just the little routines that help, that sometimes go by the wayside, that help in the mornings, whether, being grateful or saying prayers on the way to, work, or, but just reading the books. I have read these books, but rereading them, it sounds like a mountain to climb in itself, but turning them on in the car on the way to work, those types of things, they all help. But something that Scott just said, and it sounds really silly, but when I have a to-do list, I follow it. When it's on my calendar, I do it. So a daily checklist, I wrote that down because I thought, gosh, that would really help me with all those simple things to get the day started. I feel like we've really done really well in my office with my assistants mastering a process, and they don't let go. They know exactly what needs to be done, but maybe for me within myself to improve myself, that daily checklist of things: body, mind, spirit, relational, emotional, financial health, and maturity. I think I do need those daily reminders. Yeah.
That's great. Silas, I get to give Eric a little crap here. You know, you talk about the 5 a.m. club. Well, he's just getting in from the night before at 5 a.m. So he's already up. He's just rolling in from the night before, all his activities and everything. How you doing, Eric? I got him smiling. He's
You got it?
coming.
Yeah. Hey, Cliff, how you doing?
Yeah, he's coming to Omaha next week. So, you know, but I'm going to make
Yeah.
sure no matter how late you're out the night before, you got to answer the bell at 8 a.m.
I've honestly been very, very disciplined on that. But no, to your point, there's a good author. His name's Craig Ballantyne, and he wrote a book, an audio and or book, but called the Perfect Week Formula. And it kind of speaks to a lot of the things that you guys were
Okay.
talking about. I would urge anybody to do that. But to your point, he calls it magic time. But like honestly, between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m., I get a
Yep.
lot of stuff done because it's non-disturbed,
Yeah.
focused, concentrated work, so I do value the mornings. Silas and I've recently been on the last 10 weeks. We're trying to develop something, and we've been on a call at 6 a.m. every Thursday. It seems like, so it's, you just get a lot done in that time period versus nighttime during the day.
Yeah. There's constant interruptions during the day. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the to kind of wrap up 4 laws of behavior change, it's really tool strategies that, how do we build better systems or better habits, all these things. We're all working on these things, right? We want to get better. We want to try to move that needle. And so, when you think about these habits, and I think it's in your outline, I don't remember. I think it's part of your outline, but sometimes a habit's it's going to be hard to remember. And so what do we need to do? We need to make it obvious. So if something that we're doing or a routine that we're trying to establish, it's not locking in. We're not locking in on it. It's hard to remember. I'm forgetting too many things. Then we need to make it obvious. Other times we won't feel like starting, and I've been there. Man, I want to get there, but I don't, oh man, you mean I'm going to have to do this? So sometimes we won't feel like starting, and we'll need to make it attractive. So if we can make our habits attractive, we'll want to get started. Many cases, what happens is we find that a habit, it's going to be too difficult, and we need to make it easy. So how can we make that difficult? How can we just get started? And how can we make that easy? And sometimes we won't feel like sticking with it. We start, and that's been true of me as well. I start a habit, New Year's resolutions. How many people start? And what are they? The research they've done on this, by January 10th, people have already abandoned. Or January, I mean, we start something, and sometimes we won't feel like sticking with it. And what do we need to do? We need to make it satisfying. We need to find the silver lining and make it satisfying. And so make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. So always be looking for that next way to get just a little bit better. It's not monumental. We want to see that. We want to see that needle moving, and we're not going to see it moving right away, but we stay the course. We stay in the game. Just having an awareness around this. So you look at that diagram. The vertical axis is results. We want results immediately, but the horizontal axis is how long is it going to take us? And just to have an understanding that when we start something new, we may not see the progress. It may not be visible to the naked eye, but if we know, if we hang in there and we stay the course and we keep doing the small, simple things consistently, what's going to start to happen? That line is going to start to move up, and it will actually intersect that linear line. And that's when we start to have a breakthrough. So just having a recognition and awareness around that is important. That 1%, be looking for that 1%. The secret to getting results that last is to never stop making improvements. And so where does our growth occur? Our growth occurs when we invest in ourselves. The best investment that you will ever make is betting on yourself. It's betting on yourself, because that's where growth occurs. It's part of our 1 hour a month together. This is not working in your business. You're going to spend 95% of your time immersed in your business. But every now and then we got to step away, step outside of our business and work on our business and work on ourselves. And when we do, over time, we're going to have an exponential return on that. We absolutely will. I've been doing this for 4 decades, and we absolutely will. And so that's it for today. We've got a few minutes. If anybody has a question, a thought, anything that they're doing that's working really, really well that you'd want to share, we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left in our hour. I just open up the line, Silas, for any of that.
Yeah, I agree. As far as what was in the chat box, Zawiki, what was the name of the book that you mentioned? I didn't catch that.
I thought I put it in the chat. Did it not come through the chat? I just did.
Cool.
Did I? Yeah, it's in there. I'll
It's
just
in there.
send it.
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah.
Valentine. Okay, the perfect week formula.
Yeah, that's not one I'm familiar with either. So I'm gonna pick that one up. That's great. Anything else? Dana, you've got to have something good to say. Anything you can think of? Anybody?
The only point I think I would make, Cliff, is, again, it's really, and it was towards your early part of your presentation, it isn't hoping, it's choosing, right? These are choices. So that it's not like, right? And then once we've made the decision, then we've got to hold ourselves accountable, right? So it's starting to understand that it's a choice. And again, small enough steps so it's, you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I love that, hoping versus the choice, actually choosing, because we're all in control of what we choose to do or not do. And so that's thanks for sharing that, Scott. That's great. Choosing versus hoping. Silas, anything else? I'm not sure if Rick's on the in the meeting or not, but anything else for the good of the cause? If not, we'll
No, I just appreciate the time you're taking to pour into us and our teams. I think this is valuable. I think once a month is the right cadence on this. I know you're working on some other initiatives too, from a training and possibly podcast perspective. I think there's some cool things potentially coming down the pike that we've cross-pollinated and collaborated on a little bit. So I'm excited to see you get more entrenched and more involved in what we're doing and, offering the perspective. I think one of the things that we lost a lot of during COVID was the cross-pollination aspect of our culture and our business. And I feel like it's something that we're having to, it's not something that just automatically comes back. It's something we're having to actually reclaim and take effort, make effort to rebuild that. And so I appreciate what you're helping us do on that front.
I value the time, guys. I know how hard it is to do what you do. And so the days when it seems heavy and the lifting, there are days when it's heavy. Just hold on to the fact that you're making a difference every single day in somebody's life, whether that's an individual, a family, a small business. And you don't wake up every day and have to go to a job. You have the opportunity to go to a noble profession. And so continue to tell yourself that, believe that, because it's true. And I value the family that I'm, the Health Markets family. You've got a lot of, things could always be better, but they could always be a heck of a lot worse. And you've got a great brand, a huge company backing you, and be proud of who you represent. You represent yourselves first and foremost, but you're representing a company, you're representing your communities, and you're representing the customers and clients you serve every day. So with that, we'll call it a wrap, and everybody have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you on June 5th.
Thanks, Cliff. We appreciate you being here, buddy. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you, Cliff.